Hey, good morning. It's it's another walk downtown on a beautiful Friday morning, and happy to be back here for another look. The about the topic that came up in the Facebook group for Fast Five yesterday, and that was a question about whether it was okay to have cream in one's coffee. Actually, it was milk or creamer, and whether that would interrupt the fasting regimen. And what I wanted to say is that uh, Fast 5 is a starting point. It's intermittent fasting with a 19-hour interval between meals and a 5-hour eating window, and that's a starting point, and people can work from there to find what is going to work for them in the long term. And for it to work for them, it has to be something that they can maintain comfortably. And that's a big part of what I try to emphasize in my newer book, Appetite Correction. It's ACE, The Power of Appetite Correction. And it's important that we find the way that works for us as an individual. Now, this goes back to what I see as a complete change in how we look at overweight and obesity. Back in the 1960s, I'm going to wander down here away from the lawnmower. Just go down this dock for a minute. Back in the 1960s, obesity and overweight was pretty much an individual problem, and so it made sense to try to treat the individual. I'm going to head back. But through the course of the 70s, 80s, 90s, and up to now, the problem has grown to include about 2/3 of the population. But as that change was happening, I'm going to hold on for a minute. It's getting too loud. I'll just let you look at the view here. All right, hopefully that's okay. So over the course of the last 3 or 4 decades, it's grown from what was an individual problem to something that is affecting the majority of our population. But the medical world hasn't really stopped to look at that and say, what are we going to do? Put 2/3 of the population on drugs, or operate on 2/3 of the population? It didn't seem like that ever struck anybody as a bad idea, but it strikes me as a terrible idea. And so what we have to do instead is step back and say, well, what's going on? And what's going on is that we've got a cultural problem. And we have basically put ourselves as people in the middle of a feed too much food. And what happens is what you would expect to happen if you put any animal in a feedlot, kept it from moving as much as it wanted to, and had the only thing available to do be eating food. So we have the predictable result of an action that we've imposed on ourselves. And the way to handle that isn't to go drugging and operating on everybody. It's to figure out how to separate ourselves from culture enough that we can get back to our natural appetite control systems, which until recently were good enough to take care of things. And that's what appetite correction is about. It's about finding on one's own, without any kind of drugs or surgery, finding a way to insulate oneself from the cultural influences that are pushing food at us at a rate that is just in excess of what our bodies can handle. And that recipe, or that solution, is an individual quest. And that means that what is going to work for one person doesn't necessarily work for anybody else. And so one person's cream in the coffee in the morning may be just fine, and that may have little or no influence on their appetite. But we are incredibly diverse and different creatures, and so for another person, that bit of cream may be the very thing that holds them back from shedding the extra pounds, or it may be the tipping point, eating too much. And so instead of saying that there is one solution, I'd like to say that there's one quest for everybody in our culture, and that is to find the way that works for them. So I welcome your feedback. You can write at me, Bert at bertherring.com. Stop by the website and visit and read more about what I've had to say. Or you can also find my page on Facebook, Bert Herring MD. Thanks for stopping by. One last view. Here you go.